Introducing Chapter 1, Before History.
The idea of Homo sapiens. Point 1. Australopithecus. They were known as the southern ape. They walked upright on two legs, and they were able to communicate verbally, but it was not as well developed. They made tools such as scrapers and choppers, and they traveled deliberately because of the season's change. Point 2. Homo erectus. They were upright walking human beings. They used sophisticated tools. They created fires, which were used for cooking, defenses, and heat. They were able to communicate complex ideas, but it was not as well developed. Third point, migrations of Homo erectus. Increased control over environment, migrated to North Africa and Eurasian lands. They moved to West, East, Southeast, and Southern Asia. Last point, the natural environment. Homo sapiens made dwellings for themselves in caves and in hut-like structures fabricated from wood, bones, and animal skins. Archaeologists believe that changes in the Earth's climate must have altered the natural environment enough to harm these species. Overall, Homo sapiens used their intelligence, sophisticated tools, and language to exploit the natural world efficiently.
Paleolithic society. Point 1. Relative social equality. Hunting and gathering prevents private property. Influence started by age, strength, courage, intelligence, fertility, and force of personality. There was no clearly defined government, and lack of accumulated wealth led to equality of people within settlements. Point 2. Big game hunting. Homo sapiens fashioned special tools such as sharp knives, spears, and bows and arrows, and devised special tactics for hunting animals. Hunters wore disguises such as animal skins and had coordinated movements as attack strategies. Overall, Paleolithic hunting was a complicated venture. Point 3. Paleolithic settlements. In regions where food resources were especially rich, a few people in late Paleolithic times abandoned the nomadic lifestyle. The most prominent Paleolithic settlements were those of Natufian society in the eastern Mediterranean, Jaman in Japan, and Chinook in the Pacific. Jaman harvested buckwheat and fish. Jaman had acorns, wild berries, and massive salmon in the local rivers. Point 4. Neanderthal peoples. Named after Neander Valley in West Germany, same region as Homo sapiens, little interbreeding and deliberate burials and rituals, and significance of life and death. Point 5. Venus figurines. Was found in Austria, was the Roman goddess of love, and had exaggerated sexual features, and was the generation of new life. Point 6. Cave paintings. Was found in the Lazo caves in France. Reasons for these paintings was successful hunting expeditions, sympathetic magic. Materials used was minerals, plants, blood, saliva, water, and animal fat.
The Neolithic era and the transition to agriculture. Point 1. Neolithic era, aka New Stone Age. Early stages of agriculture, use of stone tools. Neolithic peoples sought to ensure themselves with more regular food supplies by encouraging the growth of edible crops and bringing wild animals into dependence on human keepers. Neolithic celebrated fertility, growth, death, and regenerated life. For example, they believed in the pregnant goddess of vegetation.
Point 2. Early spread of agriculture. Agriculture spread fast due to methods. Slash and burn cultivation method helped to spread cultivation. Foods in one area only were spread to others. Example, wheat agriculture was physically demanding.
Point 3. Emergence of villages and towns. Their agricultural economy and rapidly increasing numbers encouraged Neolithic peoples to adopt new forms of social organization.
Going to India. The introduction of Islam to northern India. Amid nomadic incursions and contests for power, northern India also experienced the arrival of Islam and the establishment of Islamic states. Islam reached India by several routes. One was military. Arab forces entered India as early as the mid-7th century, even before the establishment of the Umayyad Caliphate, although their first expeditions were exploratory ventures rather than campaigns of conquest. In the year 711, however, a well-organized expedition conquered Sindh, the Indus River valley in northwestern India, and incorporated it as a province of the expanded Umayyad Empire. At mid-century, along with most of the rest of the Dar al-Islam, Sindh passed into the hands of the Abbasid caliphs. The Hindu kingdoms of southern India. Although it also remained politically divided, the southern part of the Indian subcontinent largely escaped invasions, chronic war, and turmoil that troubled the north. Most Hindu rulers in the south presided over small, loosely administered states. Competition between states sometimes resulted in regional wars, but southern conflicts were less frequent, less intense, and less damaging than those that plagued the north. Production and trade in the Indian Ocean Basin, agriculture in the monsoon world. Because of the rhythms of the monsoons, irrigation was essential for the maintenance of a large, densely populated agricultural society. During the spring and summer, warm, moisture-laden winds from the southwest bring most of India's rainfall. During the autumn and winter, cool and very dry winds blow from the northeast. To achieve their agricultural potential, Indian lands required good watering by the southern monsoon, supplemented by irrigation during the dry months, light rain during the spring and summer months, or short supplies of water for irrigation commonly led to drought, reduced harvests, and widespread famine. Trade and economic development of southern India. Political fragmentation of the subcontinent did not prevent robust trade between the different states and regions of India. As the population grew, opportunities for specialized work became more numerous. Increased trade was a natural result of this process. Caste and society. The political, economic, and social changes of the post-classical era brought a series of challenges for India's caste system. Migrations, the growing prominence of Islam, economic development, and urbanization all placed pressures on the caste system, as it had developed during the Vedic and classical eras. But the caste system has never been a rigid, unchanging structure. Rather, individuals and groups have continuously adjusted it and adapted it to new circumstances. Adjustments and adaptations of the post-classical era resulted in a caste system that was more complex than in earlier ages, and that also extended its geographic reach deeper into southern India than ever before. In the absence of strong central governments, the caste system helped maintain order in local communities by providing guidance on individuals' roles in society and their relationships with others. Caste and migrations. Within few generations,
blockade and airlift in 1948 to 1949 was when the Soviets retaliated by blocking all road, rail, and water links between Berlin and Western Germany, and for all 11 months American and British air crews flew around-the-clock missions to supply West Berlin with the necessities of life. Soviet leaders called off the blockade in 1949, but airlift continued. Also, in 1948 to 1949, an international crisis arose when the Soviet Union pressured the Western powers to relinquish their jurisdiction over Berlin. The forces of the United States, the Soviet Union, Britain, and France occupied Germany and its capital Berlin, which was divided into 4 zones. The People's Republic of China was established on October 1st, 1949, and brought to an end the long period of imperialist intrusion in China, and spawned a close relationship between the world's largest and most powerful socialist states. This led to the reorganization of all aspects of Chinese society, amounted to a frontal attack on Chinese traditions. Determined to unify Korea, the Pyongyang regime ordered more than 100,000 troops across the 38th parallel in a surprise attack pushing back South Korea defenders and Seoul. During the war, the Americans joined South Korea and together pushed North Korean forces back to the 38th parallel, fulfilling the UN mandate. In 1959, a revolutionary movement headed by Fidel Castro overthrew Batista. Castro worked to limit its operation, purging the Batista supporters left in Cuba and seizing foreign properties and businesses. He also accepted help from the Soviet Union, fueling U.S. fears about his communist leanings. U.S. quickly retaliated. In 1961, a force of 1,500 anti-Castro Cubans, transported by the Central Intelligence Agency, landed on Cuba at a place called the Bay of Pigs. Within 3 days, Castro military had either captured or killed the entire invasion force, even strengthening Castro's position in Cuba and his commitment to communism. This led to the Operation Mongoose. Also, in 1961, the communist East German state was hemorrhaging from a steady drain of refugees who preferred to live in capitalist West Germany. Therefore, the communists reinforced their fortification along the border between East and West Germany, following the construction of a fortified wall dividing the city of Berlin. The wall started as a layer of barbed wire and eventually became layers deep. On October 22, 1962, President Kennedy went on a national television to inform the public about the U.S. discovery of offensive nuclear missiles and launch sites in Cuba and to frame the nation's response to this crisis. The Soviet government apparently took this bold step to protect the Castro government, give the USSR greater diplomatic leverage vis-a-vis the United States, undermine U.S. credibility in the region, and gain more influence in Latin America. Whatever the precise motives, the deployment of nuclear missiles that could reach targets in the United States within minutes represented an unacceptable threat to U.S. national security. The Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962 dramatically underscored the risk inherent in extending the Cold War throughout the world. In 1965, U.S. troops were sent to Vietnam. President Johnson ordered the deployment to provide protection for a key U.S. airbase there. Both Communist China and Soviet Union threatened to intervene if the United States continued to apply its military might on behalf of South Vietnamese. Later, in 1968, the Communist Party leader, Alexander Dubček, launched a democratic socialist revolution. He supported a liberal movement known as the Prague Spring and promised his fellow citizens socialism with a human face. By 1968, more than 500,000 U.S. troops served in country in defense of South Vietnamese democracy, and massive bombing campaigns were unleashed on North Vietnam. War weariness and outright militant protests against the U.S. role in Vietnam spread in the U.S., signaling a republic distancing from U.S. Cold War policy. Then presidential candidate Richard Nixon pledged the end of war. In October 1990, the German Democratic Republic ceased to exist, and 5 new federal states on its former territory joined the Federal Republic of Germany. East and West Berlin were reunited. In 1991, a group of conspirators decided to seize power. Gorbachev's former friend and ally, Boris Yeltsin, crushed the help of loyal Red Army units. As the Soviet system disintegrated, several of its regions moved toward independence, and on the 25th of December, 1991, the Soviet flag fluttered for the last time. The Soviet Socialist Republic ceased to exist. The Cold War that resulted from the ideological contest between the superpowers had ordered and defined the world for almost 50 years. It also shaped how the nations and people of the world perceive themselves. The stunning impact of the end of the Cold War reverberated in policy-making circles and on the streets.
The age of access. With the advancement of technology, it gives us the ability to communicate with others by radio, television, telephone, fax machines, and many other ways. However, because technology does require money not only to purchase them, but to maintain them and upgrade them, this all creates difficulty for everyone to have access to technology, which creates a big border between the connected and the unconnected. Some leaders are afraid of today's technology due to the fact that English is becoming the primary language of global communications. Because of this, some parts of the world are compelled to master English, causing them to leave their language behind. Beginning in the 18th century, industrialization and other factors gave birth to a society in which the consumption of goods satisfied wants rather than the needs or necessities. Critics sometimes refer to this homogenizing aspect as Americanization or McDonaldization. These terms suggest that the consumer culture that was developed in the US during the mid-20th century has been exported all over the world. Meanwhile, companies like McDonald's and Pizza Hut succeed with their sales all over the world. Those little businesses like cafes and shops in France are closing down. The success of US mass culture has become a threat to local and indigenous cultures all over the world. Because of technology, such parts of the world that want to ensure that communication systems don't take power, for example, in China, their Public Security Bureau, which is an agency that concerns itself with crimes. This agency is keeping technology under their control by building a so-called firewall or wagun, which is a net wall in efforts to repulse foreign invaders. The growth of human population is at the root of many environmental problems. As people are born, pollution levels increase, more habitats, animal and plant species disappear, and more natural resources are consumed. In the recent decades, two environmental issues have taken center stage, which are biodiversity and global warming. Biodiversity refers to the maintenance of multiple species and plants. Now, the most serious problem is the destruction of natural habitats because of urbanization and other causes. Extinction currently threatens about 4,500 animal species. Also, the second one, global warming, which is the rise in global temperature, which carries potentially dire consequences for humanity. Now, global warming's main cause is atmospheric pollution. A prototypical non-governmental organization, or NGO, would be the Red Cross, which was founded by John Henry. This agency was originally dedicated to alleviating the suffering of wounded soldiers. Another example of NGO was the Greenpeace, which was founded in 1970, which was an environmental organization dedicated to the preservation of Earth's natural resources and its diverse animal and plant life. Greenpeace activists gained a lot of fame for their daring exploits, which are calculated to attract media attention to environmental concerns. Now, on the other hand, an international governmental organization is the United Nations, which superseded the League of Nations. This association of sovereign states attempts to find solutions to global patterns and to deal with virtually any matter of concern to humanity. The UN does not legislate, rather they have meetings, representatives of the vast majority of the world's countries with the voice and with the vote. One of the many issues that demonstrated the role and life of a woman in South Asia is dowry debts. The birth of a girl in India was known as a burden because of their custom of paying dowries, which is a gift or money or goods. These dowries were given to husbands and his family upon a woman's marriage. Now, if the husband believes his gift is not enough, or even if he's annoyed with his wife or wants another wife, he has legally the ability to light her on fire, and her death is defined as a cooking accident. The creation of the Sara doll was an answer or response to American culture. The Sara doll was made to fight off American influences as expressed in the Barbie doll. The doll is dressed in long robes and head coverings, in contrast to Barbie, who exposes her body. Sara promotes pure values expected on Islamic girls and women, along with her brother Dara, which demonstrates the contrast to the plastic doll couple Barbie and Ken. The most serious epidemic threat comes from AIDS, short for immunodeficiency syndrome. This fatal disorder is linked with the human immunodeficiency virus of HIV. These diseases slowly attack the immune system, which makes the immune system weak, causing the person to be exposed to more infections, usually leading to death. This disease is spread through sexual intercourse. Medical experts first identified AIDS in 1981 and was dramatically affecting homosexual men and drug users in New York and San Francisco. More evidence of AIDS was seen in sub-Saharan Africa, and rather quickly it was known that AIDS has developed into a worldwide epidemic that affected virtually every nation. At the end of 2003, the number of people living with HIV and AIDS was at 37.8 million, and over 20 million AIDS deaths had occurred since the beginning of the epidemic. China's one-child family policy is a program intended for family planning. This policy was one of the many that was implemented by Chinese leaders. This policy limited families to having only one child. This policy was implemented due to the explosive population growth. Recently, China made a change to this policy, allowing them to have 2 children. This change is due to the fact that most of China is becoming a land with the most aged population in the world.